According to the League of Legends Universe Wiki, magic is the foundation of all known realms of existence, which are the physical, spiritual, and celestial realms. But even though magic exists in all of these realms, it varies a lot, not just from one realm to another, but also from region to region. For example, let's take the spiritual realm. That's where Bandle City is, which we know is the enchanted land and home of all Yordles, and even the place where they get reborn when they're destroyed in the physical realm. There's also the realm of death, which is shaped by the various beliefs of the people of Runeterra. It has infinite landscapes that vary endlessly between different cultures, depending on what each one believes. I mean, that ends up being kind of relative. Let me explain using Mordekaiser as an example. Back when he was still known as San Huzal, he fully believed that after his lifetime of brutal conquest in the physical world, he'd have a seat eternally reserved at the gods' table in the glorious Hall of Bones. But when his mortal life finally ended, his soul arrived in the afterlife and saw something completely different from what he expected. It was just an empty gray desert, covered in ethereal mist and filled with whispers in the language of Akhnun, the tongue of the dead. There were lost souls wandering around, slowly fading away into the mist. And after he got revived, everyone he killed during his reign, until the point where he was banished by LeBlanc and Vlad, ended up having their souls ties to Mitna Reknun, also called the Grey Realm. Mordekaiser with his sorcery used their souls as a brick and mortar to build his own empire, literally molding them like clay into his twisted undead army. You can even see a bunch of distorted and fused souls, kinda like those cluster gems in Steven Universe. But in 2020, we saw that the Ionians have their own take on what the Realm of Death is, and they call it the Path. It's even tied to the Spirit Blossom, where we see the Gatekeeper is trying to guide the souls, and the Collector is trying to make them part of his collection. There's also the whole thing about spirits being able to return for a day, when the barrier between the physical and spiritual realms become thinner than usual. In Freljord, the people who believe in the wolf say that the Realm of Death is called the Realm Beyond. They believe that in death, they join the spirits of the fallen shamans, forming a new pack as they journey through the great beyond. In Noxus, nowadays, the followers of the kindred, especially the wolf, who's the dominant figure there, believe in the afterlife called Valraknun. Great warriors who die in battle go through trials, and those who are deemed worthy earn the right to join the wolf in his eternal hunt. And Bessa Medarda was actually taken there and went through those trials. This was shown in the cinematic Blood, Sweat, and Tears. She even saw figures of ancient warriors from past eras and fought one who looked a lot like Pantheon. The chosen of the wolf skin actually shows one of the possible outcomes of that cinematic, if Mbessa had chosen to stay alongside the shielded warrior and the others, leading the hunt. Back when Camivore still existed, the people there believed in the Hall of Ancestors. That's where the dead would be welcomed by a group of Camivorian ancestors, including the founders of their nation, to make sure the dead were recognized and accepted by their ancestors. The Camivorians marked their foreheads of the deceased with a blood trident. So yeah, you can see that in Runeterra there are several afterlives, all a part of the spirit realm. Then there's also Mara's Omegnum, which is both a fortress and a Lunari temple, mostly located within the spirit. Only during special lunar events does this temple transform and appear in the physical world, popping up at Mount Targon. It's actually pretty similar to the Ionian sanctuary where Yunara was in exile along with the Darkin of the Glaive. As we know, Alun lives in Mara's Omegnum, where she communicates with celestial beings to empower Lunari weapons, which she then sends to her twin brother Aphelios. Another part of the spirit realm, a more hidden one this time, is the Glade. It's said to be an even stranger place than Bandle City, existing way before the Yordles ever came into the world. It might even be the place where Bandle City originally came from. This place is made up of pure primordial magic, and it was so well hidden that no Yordle had ever found it, until Pix, the fairy, guided Lulu there. Wrapping up this whole section about realms and sub-realms, let's go back to magic and how it's defined. Basically, magic is like the essence of existence. Literally everything that exists has magic in its makeup. It's like reality's signature: present immortals, magical beings, magical creatures, cosmic entities, inanimate objects, and everything else that exists. If you want a more radical example, just think of magic as atoms. Now from here on, I'm going to talk about the different classifications magic can have and how people use them. The primary forms of magic are identified by the realm they pull their power from. Elemental magic, for example, lets you control the elements by tapping into the energies of the material realm. A lot of elemental mages are born with this ability, like Lux with her light magic, but elemental magic is still something that pretty much anyone can learn. It's especially common in Ishtal. Elemental magic gives users the power to manipulate everything in the physical realm, from basic elements like fire or water to more abstract ones like time. When using elemental magic, a mage can mess with the physical and material properties of objects based on the element they're working with, possibly even down to a subatomic level. If we're making a tree analogy, an elemental mage would make a tree grow by altering its physical properties, like making it bigger or changing the environment to help it grow. Kinda like what I do when I make these videos in a way that makes you want to like, subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member to get access to a bunch of cool perks, like early access to videos and choosing video topic. Anyway, then there's a spiritual magic, which draws from the natural magical energies of the spirit realm. Some spiritual mages are born with it, but a huge number of people, especially in Ionia, use spiritual magic all the time. To use spiritual magic, these mages have to perform some kind of ritual or martial art to bring their soul closer to the spirit realm, letting them draw power from it and manifest it in the material realm. Going back like 10 or 11,000 years, the Vastaya Shirei were originally mages before they completely altered their bodies, fusing themselves with the spirit realm and becoming insanely powerful, which is why nowadays their descendants, the Vastaya, are naturally magical and deeply tied to spiritual magic. When using spiritual magic, mages can commune with certain spirits or tap into the spiritual life essence of all things, living or not, in nature. This lets them manipulate emotions tied to the spirit realm, use the abilities of powerful spirits they commune with, or even mess with life and death itself. Spiritual magic is usually unpredictable and chaotic because of the nature of the spirit realm. That's why spiritual mages have to be careful not to mess up the delicate balance between the material and spirit realms, or they could put themselves in danger and seriously damage the spirit realm too. Back to the tree analogy. A mage using spiritual magic would make a tree grow by getting close to the spirit realm, talking to the tree's spirit, and convincing it to grow. In Ionia, this is actually super common. It's totally normal to have living houses, unlike places in Demacia, where people chop down trees, turn them into planks, and use them to build houses. Ionians respect nature and do things differently. They don't want to mess with the local tree spirits. Doing that would have negative consequences for them, their families, and future generations. So instead, they hire local carpenters who try to convince the trees to grow into house-like shapes, which ends up being better for everyone. But since these are living homes, the tree's branches can grow and shift sometimes overnight because of the tree's natural magic. We actually saw a solid example of what can go wrong in that cinematic called Tales of Runeterra, Ionia, The Lesson, where a Noxian kid clueless about Ionian traditions cuts down a guardian tree for firewood and ends up getting chased by the sanctuary's protector, who's furious at what he did and nearly kills him. If Akali hadn't stepped in and made the kid plant a seed in the ground, things would have gone south real quick. It was kind of an equivalent exchange, you know? He took something, so now he's got to give something back. At the end, Shin says something in Ionian while making a hand sign, and you can see his eyes glow, showing that he used spiritual magic and he was actually saying something to the seed. The seed then grows into a new tree and houses the guardian spirit, letting it rest again. So yeah, that's pretty much it for spiritual magic. Now, let's talk about celestial magic. Celestial magic comes from the celestial realm, which is this mysterious, enigmatic place where powerful celestial beings like the aspects live. And yeah, even though we call Leona, Pantheon, Kale, and so on aspects, they're not actually aspects. The aspects are the entities that grant power. The people themselves are what the wiki calls aspect hosts. But since everyone just calls them aspects, I'm not going to be the weirdo saying something different. Because of how hard it is to understand the celestial realm, celestial magic is also really hard to understand. What we do know is that it draws energy from the entire universal concepts, from physical stuff like the sun to intangible stuff like war. So far, there are no known mortals born with celestial magic, except for Kale and Morgana, who technically wouldn't be considered mages since their power came from their mother Mahira, the aspect of justice. But like, I kinda disagree with that. If they're using magic, even if they're mortals, partially transformed by an aspect's power, since Mahira was pregnant when she became the aspect of justice, and the twins in her room got some of that power too, I'd still say they count as mages changed by magic, just like Rise. He was a mage, and after years of exposure to world runes, his body clearly changed. The dude's blue. Anyway, moving on. People who use celestial magic get powers that match the concept their magic comes from. So someone who used magic is linked to the sun might have sun-related abilities, and someone tied to war might get enhanced combat skills. Like Pantheon, he doesn't have any specific war-based power or anything like that, but he's strong. He's got that shield that blocks all damage, and his Q just like goes boom. Celestial mages can tap into cosmic energy to summon celestial bodies or create energy from pure cosmic force. Celestial magic is crazy powerful and really hard for mortals to wrap their heads around because it pretty much lets users bend reality to a certain degree. After the Great Darken War devastated most of the world, celestial magic started getting studied way more. A group of mages saw it as a light in the sky during all of the darkness and started studying, practicing, and even teaching it. Even Viegar, curious as ever, joined them and learned how to draw hope from the patterns created by star movement, whatever that means. So let's go back to our tree analogy. A powerful mage using celestial magic could make a tree grow by using cosmic energy to reach the celestial realm and literally bend reality to make a tree grow. Or they could get power from some kind of celestial celestial incarnation tied to the trees, usually in the form of an aspect or some other celestial being. Now that we covered the primary sources of magic, I'm going to go over the many different forms each one of them can take. And to help you understand what I mean by forms, think of it like this. The primary source is the ingredient, and the forms are the dishes you can cook with it, like take an egg, for example. There are tons of omelet recipes where the egg is the main ingredient, meaning they share the same source, but they add different stuff to make totally different meals. That said, let's get into it. The known forms of elemental magic are air magic, electricity magic, fire magic, ice magic, water magic, light magic, darkness magic, stone magic, magma magic, metal magic, and time magic. The known forms of spiritual magic are soul manipulation, empathic magic, mind magic, memory magic, shadow magic, illusion magic, animation magic, telekinesis, spiritual manifestation, spiritual rift magic, spiritual sense, soul sense, dream magic, and painting magic. And finally, the forms of celestial magic are cosmic magic, celestial fire magic, celestial light magic, and divine divination. Now, I'm gonna name the kinds of magic that don't have any classification. These aren't tied to any known primary sources. Arcane magic, cartomancy, magic absorption, and magic sense. And lastly, there are hybrid forms of magic, which are created by combining different sources. Hemomancy, nature magic, and sound magic are combinations of elemental and spiritual magic. Ascension magic and rune magic are combinations of elemental and celestial magic. Healing magic is a combo of celestial, spiritual, and elemental magic. And mixed magic isn't even new. Way back when the earliest versions of Hextech, even before the whole thing with the Bracken crystals, Hextech was a kind of magic created by fusing elemental and spiritual magic using technology. So if rune magic involves celestial energy, it's not that surprising that Victor, in his final form, ended up kinda looking like a cosmic entity. There were multiple times where we saw him in what looked like a spirit or celestial realm, naked, glowing with a body of light, alongside with that assistant Sky who turned into dust. Not to mention that hive mind thing formed by his followers, who had their bodies physically transcended and their emotions wiped out. The kind of magic Victor uses in Arcane has no classification, so don't take that stuff too literally. It's still really confusing, especially with Riot constantly changing things. And in case you're wondering where exactly magic comes from, a rioter once said that during the creation of the world runes were used by a legion of unknown celestials to shape a new realm. I even made a video called The Supreme Theory of Runeterra, where I explain all of that in detail. The origin of the realms, the universe, and why everything works the way it does. That info came out back during the Kale and Morgana rework. And just so you know, the Celestials' whole plan was apparently left on hold. But nobody knows why, especially why they left the world runes in Runeterra. But like I said in that video, I think it was to help the planet develop. I believe that the origin of magic and the way everything works is tied to the presence of the runes. Like, they're so insanely powerful that just by being there, they passively influence how everything functions. But there are also other theories, like the ones that say Runeterra is incomplete, like literally missing a chunk of the planet, just like in Adventure Time with the Mushroom War, where they always show a piece of the planet missing. If the Rune Wars happened again, that's literally what would go down. You can't talk about magic without talking about mages. Natural-born mages tend to manifest their abilities when they're still young, without any training or even realizing they're magical. That's why born mages usually end up being way more powerful, but they also need way more control and caution so they don't hurt themselves or everyone around them. Those who aren't born with magic can still learn it through the intense training, study, and discipline. Most of the time, people who manage to learn a type of magic end up having some kind of obsession or personal motive that drives their magical skills. Even though anyone can get better at magic through practice, they usually only reach a fraction of the power that naturally gifted mages have. Magic can also be channeled into or stored in external objects instead of flowing through a person's body. This can be done using natural magic materials, tech, or even enchanted items, like rune magic. Riven Sword is a solid example of that. Hemomancy might fall into that category too, maybe because of the Hemolith, that reddish gem they use to lock Briar's containment device, the chair, which keeps her in check, but it also helps her stay focused and not give in completely to her insane bloodlust. That's why she gets calmer, more friendly, and more rational. Other notable objects include Hextech itself. That was the whole idea behind its invention, giving anyone the ability to use magic through its devices. It's kind of like Naruto. Back in the day, people had to train for years to use jutsus. But in Boruto, with those ninja tools, everything changed. You just insert a scroll into the device and boom, jutsu happens. No hand signs needed. You get it, right? Anyway, moving on, let's talk about Petricite. It's made from a powerful combo of Petricite tree bark, lime, and ash. The resulting material is really good at absorbing magic. which is why mages lose their powers when they're trapped, wounded, or exposed to anything with petricite in it. It acts like a sponge. For mages, it's kind of like kryptonite to Superman. In the comics, Lux even drank diluted petricite mixed with some liquid to keep Silas from stealing her powers again and to stop him. She obviously got super sick, but it temporarily shut off her magic. There are even nobles who use that kind of treatment to hide magical relatives or family members. And even though petricite can store magic for centuries, it still has a limit. If a petricite object absorbs too much magical energy, it stops containing it and starts leaking out all that residual energy, basically turning into a magical item itself. Then we've got relic stones. These are ancient marbled stone fragments created long before mortals ever walked Runeterra. These rare stones are inherently infused with spiritual magic in a super stable form, acting as conduits that pull power from the spirit realm and store it. Unlike most magical artifacts that are made for one specific purpose, relic stones can be used in all kinds of ways. In fact, the weapons and other gear used by the Sentinels of Light are made from these stones. And if you've made it this far and you're still wondering where the void fits in all of this, well, it doesn't. That's because according to the wiki itself, even though it has some weird supernatural mysterious energy, the void doesn't actually have magic. It's the literal opposite of life and existence. If we want to make rough comparison to our reality, the void would kind of be like the concept of antimatter. But then there's this thing that kind of blows that whole idea up. In the Champion Insights article for Rel, on League's official site, a writer named Jared Carnival Writes Rosen, who's a narrative lead, talks about how the Black Rose is interested in the dark powers that could help expand their empire's influence. He even lists some examples, including void magic. So yeah, we've got a contradiction, and it's definitely not the first time Riot's contradicted itself, or left weird lore holes lying around. And let's be real, it's probably not the last time either. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.